Hello, everybody, and good morning. All right. So you know what? We are approaching summer. Can you believe that? And I know it's kind of felt like it, hasn't it? There's been so much sunshine, and there has been just opportunity to be outside. Even today, shockingly enough, in our pre-service run-through, we had a conversation with people that are typically inside people that said they are becoming pool people. So, you know what? Things are changing. Things are changing. And I hope that you have been, I hope that you have taken advantage of some of the weather, had an opportunity to enjoy it. But man, it's been really good. And for those of you that enjoy golf, I hope you have enjoyed the sunshine. And for those of you that enjoy motorcycles, that you've been on your motorcycles. And for those of you that enjoy being on bodies of water, enjoy the bodies of water. And for those of you that enjoy hiking mountains, we still don't know why. And so, no, I'm kidding. You know what? We know why. Not really, but... You know, it's pretty amazing that we live in the Lower Mainland. It's so beautiful here. And to me, it's so obvious of the consistent reminder that God is just with us. You know, when I think about the mountains, it's been one of the more challenging weeks that I've had in a long time personally, but even within just the church in general, it's been a challenging week for many people. And one of my favorite psalms is actually Psalm 121, which tells us to lift our eyes to the mountains. And as we do that, to be reminded of where our help comes from. Shockingly enough, I thought about it all week, and then this morning I sat down. I get up before the service, and I sat down. I opened my phone, and I looked at what my Bible reading plan, any other Bible reading plan people, just tell me what to read. Just tell me what to read, you know. And with Psalm 121. And so I hope that wherever you find yourself today could be the most incredible week. It could be the most difficult and challenging week. Whether it's filled with tears and heartache, or whether it's been filled with like moments of awesome wonder that we sang about today, that I hope that you can find your encouragement, and that you would be able to find joy knowing that you have a God in heaven who loves you and is with you and cares for you. So we are finishing our series today called Keep the Change. Next week, we're starting a series on the book of Jonah and the character of Jonah. And he's quite a fascinating character that we find in the Old Testament. And we're going to call it Navigating a Turnaround. So I don't know if you've had challenges in your life. I've had many challenges in mine and still do. But if you know somebody, or you yourself are heading through some challenges right now, I want to encourage you to come back, because the story of Jonah has so much hope in it. And not just for what Jonah accomplishes in the story, but for himself personally. And he really has to go to some really challenging and difficult and dark places. But in those places, he finds God. So I want to encourage you to come back next week. Bring somebody with you. It's going to be a great series that we're going to start. So we talked about last week in Keep the Change. We talked about last week, and actually the first week, we talked about this, that disciples of Jesus, or those who are followers of Jesus. Okay, I got nervous there. The TV got unplugged, so that's why I hesitated. Disciples are marked out clearly by their attitude toward money. Actually, Jesus talks more about money in the New Testament than he does heaven and hell. As a matter of fact, he's on and on and on within his parables. He talks about livestock, or he talks about crops, and now we have currency, but the currency then would have been livestock. Now there was other things like gold and other things that were pursued, but a lot of people's wealth was tied up in agriculture, and so Jesus uses a lot of these examples with things like harvest and seed time and harvest, and talks about livestock, and so on and on and on it goes. But Jesus is quite interested, for those who are followers of Jesus, and I understand if you're trying to figure out your journey and you're on the path to pursuing Jesus, or you're just wondering who God is, and so you're here today, that might be different for you. But for those who are followers of Jesus, disciples are marked out clearly by their attitude toward money. So the reason that we're talking about a series like we are about money, the reason we talk about it is because we understand that it's important to Jesus and it's important to all of us. And so when we talk about this, though, there's good sides of money. Things like the fact that we can eat, or the fact that we can have a roof over our head, or the fact that you either charged your car to get to church if you're on the cutting edge, right? Or if you used, just like me today, I used gas in my car, and I got to church, So wherever you find yourself, you charge, you have money, which produced then the opportunity to move faster than in all of history. We get to go from place to place very quickly. Now, money can produce really good things in our life. It can produce things like vacations, or it can produce things like your opportunity to go to school and get education. On and on and on it goes. We know the benefits of money, but we also know that there's a dark side to anything, right? There's a positive and there's a negative. And the dark side of money, there's two misconceptions that come up. So last week we talked about one of the misconceptions, and this week we're going to talk about the second one. The one we talked about last week was you deserve what they have. And this becomes then a motivator. It's a motivator for desiring what our neighbor might have, or what we see on social media feeds. And so when we believe that we deserve what somebody else has, then we end up going in debt for that. And then we forget things like the fact that and we talked about this last week, we're managers, not owners of the things that we have. We forget things like this, gratitude, right? We don't walk humbly. And we lack contentment in our life. And no wonder, because we pursue what somebody else has. And the proposition I made last week was, if we're going to defeat this comparison trap, because we said there's no win in comparison. So if we're going to defeat the comparison trap, then we need to make a plan to be generous. And I said, if it's not here, then somewhere else. But I also said this, is that our life should reflect this type of generosity. Oddly enough, as we taught this last week, a bunch of opportunities came up, and I just want to celebrate one right now, because there's many of you that have made a plan to consistently support Centerpoint Church. Here's what's amazing about that. This week, we partnered with New Hope Community Services, who brings refugee families over from all parts of the world, and they provide free housing for them to immigrate into Canada and to integrate into our culture. Well, as a result of your consistent generosity, we were able to buy a shed. They recently had an arson fire that burned down their carport and a bunch of their storage, so we built a shed yesterday as a small group, and the cool part was that we didn't have to ask for more money. We didn't have to do an offering for it. Because of your consistency, we were able to just meet that need. And so thank you, Centerpoint Church, for that. Let's put our hands together for that. But here's one of the amazing parts about that, is that there's many of you that have made a plan to be generous, and as a result, we get to do things like that. We get to do classrooms and adult environments and all these different things, like supporting our small groups, and on it goes. But thank you for being generous in this, and I celebrated that last week. It's not that we don't have this in our church, because many of you have made a plan. But if we're going to come against this misconception that we deserve what they have, and we're living in discontentment, then the only way to battle this is through generosity. To live beyond ourselves is to live a generous life. So our first misconception that we talked about last week was that we deserve to have what others have. The second misconception that I want to talk about is this, is that you don't need anyone else. You see, this seems like the MO of North American culture. You get your house, you make sure that you're independent, and when you're fully independent from everybody else, then you've what? You've won. I mean, then you did it, whatever it is. But this is a misconception, and the reason I believe it's a misconception is because I think many people do their finances alone. But more than that, they solely rely on themselves to produce wealth, but not just that, but to be able to function in the everyday parts of life. And what happens is when we walk independently and we don't invite other people into our story, we make decisions in silos. And for many of us, that has worked out okay. For some of you, it hasn't. I mean, you just adopted maybe a mindset that you got from your parents about money. Or maybe you adopted a mindset of somebody you watched on TikTok that was really convincing. Or that YouTube ad that keeps coming up because I refuse to pay for premium YouTube. And so the ad keeps coming up to tell me how I can fix my finances in less than 30 days if I pay $30. I'm not going to do it, okay? But it's this idea that I don't need anybody else. And here's what I see. Don't tell me about my money. Don't talk about it. I don't want to bring it up. Why? Because I've tied so much of my identity to it. And so I want to talk to two different groups today. One is I want to talk to singles, and one I want to talk to those of you who are married. And so I want to talk first to those who are single. And I'm not going to speak on behalf of you, but I asked some of our staff some questions around money and singleness. So there's a few things I just want to bring up. With this idea of you don't need anyone else, and I can understand where you're coming from and why you came to this conclusion, is because you look at your life and you say, I can't rely on others because I am on my own. I have less because I'm alone. And this is true. There's pressures around being single in our culture. I don't have a significant other, so money is mine alone to manage. And it's true. We are responsible for the money and the resources we have. And I want to say that singles have a unique challenge. But from a number of other singles, not myself, that I chatted with this week, I just want to talk about a few more challenges. Is you make decisions independent. And so you continue the same way in your finances, potentially expecting different results. You have a pressure to share the financial load with somebody else with no backstop. And so there's stories of having to make compromises around your integrity or your character, or around some of your values because of the pressures financially that you bear. And when or if you find yourself in a relationship, you're going to tell yourself that I'm going to change my financial habits. But if you don't have a backstop and you feel that pressure, you pursue, at times, relationship, even compromising at times to try and offset the financial load. And I understand these pressures. On a very theoretical level, I don't understand them on a personal level. I haven't lived through them. But for those who are single on our staff, this is what they communicated to me, that there is a serious financial pressure often to even compromise character to make ends meet. Now, I want to talk to those of you who are married today, because money in marriage is a thing. As a matter of fact, it is the thing for why most relationships disintegrate and what creates the most amount of conflict in a marriage. 70% says the most amount of conflict in a marriage is about money. And what happens is this belief that you don't need anyone else carries into your married life because you still believe that you're independent. And yet when you get married, two become one. At least this is the Christian idea. It's the idea that it's a covenantal relationship, and let me explain what that means. It means that there's two separate people that come together and mutually submit to one another before God and say, what's mine is yours and what yours is mine. And now we're going to support one another and we're going to lay our lives down for the other. But here's the belief, is that if you don't need anyone else and you carry this mindset into your marriage around money, you're going to make decisions that are only reflective of your independence, not of your dependence on one another. And so this idea that I'm still independent, or I deserve to be happy all the time. I deserve to get my own way. I work hard. I'm the primary breadwinner, so I can assert my dominance as the primary breadwinner over the other. She stays home with the kids or he stays home with the kids, so I deserve to spend more or some of the extra money. I make more, so I can spend more. As a woman, I never need to depend on a man. As a man, I never need to depend on a woman. You see, people struggle with being one, aka combining their money for lots of different reasons. We all want our own little things over there. It creates a wedge in our marriage, and it can form distrust. We're killer at avoiding conflict. Trust me, I'm great at it. I've had to learn how to... You know, it's one thing, Destiny normally is in the kids programming, so I can just kind of talk and not have giggling. So if you didn't think I was being honest, now you know I am, okay? I avoid conflict at times. I've had to learn how to lean into it. Probably avoiding conflict in other parts of your marriage if you avoid it around money. 70% of married couples argue about money ahead of fights about household chores, togetherness, sex, snoring, and what's for dinner. Money Magazine 2004 survey. You don't need anyone else. You don't need anyone else. But you know what? Jesus invites us into a new way of life. And it's not some sort of upgrade from a past life. What we get confused by is, you know what? Jesus just becomes an add-on. He's just a little bit of, like if I just get like a little bit of Jesus, it's like a salt, I'm just going to add a little Jesus. But he invites us to a new way of life and a different way of life. And today we're going to look at what it means to move from a place of independence to dependence. And not in a negative sense of being fully codependent on somebody and losing all of your independence. But I think there's a proclivity to move towards independence rather than to lay down our own for another. Now, in every marriage or in a single relationship, when you're heading into a relationship and potentially you're starting to date, there can be somebody who can become codependent. I understand that that's a part of some relationships. But I believe when it comes to money, rarely is codependence a thing. It's often a push towards independence. In today's verse, we're going to be reading from the book of Philippians. And Paul writes this to the church of Philippi, and they're a very generous church, and they'd be generous to him personally and to making sure that at the early church, when it was so volatile and when there was lots going on and there was disciples who were killed for their faith and there was no fully formed Bible at this time. It was so volatile for the church, and yet God sustained and God was faithful. Paul writes to the church in Philippi, and he wants to encourage them. And he wants to encourage them about casting their dependence, not just on another, but to shift their focus and to shift their weight to something else. And so I'm going to actually read from a very popular portion of Scripture, but most people take the last verse in this out of context. And they do that because it's easy to take Scripture out of context and apply it to our life in the way that we want. But Paul has a specific purpose and meaning, and he's talking in the context of earthly resources and things that we own and the way that we manage them. And so he wants to help us out today. And he wants to give us a little bit of insight. And he wants to help us find contentment. Because who doesn't want more of that? It can also be translated as peace. And who doesn't want peace in their life? I'm a fan of that. So he's going to give us a little bit of insight. This is what he says in Philippians chapter 4, verse 11. He says, I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I mean, don't we want the secret? Don't we want to know how we can find contentment in every season, in every phase of life? Not just in an aspirational sense, but literally experientially, that we would find this contentment or peace. And then he continues. This is how he continues the next verse. He says, I know what it is to be in need. You see, sometimes we forget the stories of people in the Bible because we cartoonize it or we ideal, and not that the scriptures themselves shouldn't be held in high regard, but we forget that there were human authors behind the stories. When Paul is saying here, I know what it is to be in need, when Paul converted to Christianity, and maybe some of you are in the room today and you're making that decision to take the step. When Paul converted to Christianity, he was a Pharisee. And we use this in a negative sense within the context of the church, but a Pharisee was somebody who was on one of the highest religious systems. They were Jewish, and so they were one of the highest religious systems, and they would conduct orders in the temple, and they made sure that people were adhering to the law. And so when Paul converted to Christianity, he lost everything. His education didn't matter. He lost his work. He lost his ability to make income the way he used to. He lost his community. He lost a lot of things. So he knows what it means to be in need. And then he says this next. And I know what it is to have plenty. I mean, he lived as a Jew in the religious system. He would have been taken care of monetarily. And I know we don't talk about this in the church much. Especially Christians, we forget the cost of what it means to follow Jesus at times because we can get comfortable. But for those who are in the trenches, or for those who are in that point of transition or conversion towards Christianity, it comes with a tremendous cost, sometimes to family, sometimes to our work, because sometimes we have to stand up for things that aren't popular, because Jesus' ways aren't always popular. I mean, sometimes we have to forgive those who we don't want to forgive. Sometimes we have to pray for our enemies. And sometimes we have to prefer our neighbor over ourselves. And we don't like that. And yet, Paul knows that there's a cost to following Jesus. And so he says, I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. And here's what he says next. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. To which we all go, what is it, Paul? And this is where he continues. Whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. And the next verse is one that's taken out of the context of God providing for our needs. It gets put into like, I'm going to be a basketball player at the age of 40. No, I'm not. I will not make the NBA, ever. I am too short and too old, okay? But what we do with this next verse is we pull it out of context. But within context, it becomes a powerful reminder to those of us that have just walked independently that we can fully put our dependence on God. Look what Paul here says next. He says, I can do all this. I can have plenty or I can have need. I can walk in the highs of life, in the valleys. I can have tears and I can have so much laughter that I come to tears. I can go through all this through him who gives me strength. In other words, it's not my own ability. It's in casting my cares upon Jesus. It's by bringing that which matters to God. It's by reminding ourselves that it's through God who gives me the strength. And so Paul tells us that we can do all phases of life. I can manage what little I have or what much I have, lacking or in plenty, because Christ is the source of my life. I am no longer, as a follower of Jesus, or if you choose to follow Jesus, or if you are a follower of Jesus, that Christ is the source of our life. And it's so easy to forget that. For some, they don't believe and they look to put their strength on other things. For others, they admire Jesus, but not fully surrendered their life. Admirer, but not a follower. But for Paul and what he wants you to know, and what he wants me to know, is that in any circumstance, you can have the strength to endure and go through it if you choose to walk with Jesus. If you choose to put your dependence on him, to let go of your independence and to place your dependence on him. We're going to circle back to this thought in just a minute. But not only does God call us to put our dependence upon him, but he also calls us to be in community and connection with one another. You've heard us say it here that life is better in circles than in rows. And over again, we talk about joining a small group and walking shoulder to shoulder with people around you. As a matter of fact, it's amazing. We got a partner with New Hope yesterday. But one of the cool parts about it was our small group got to build the shed. Now, at the end of the day, I drove a screw right through the top of my finger. And it was an interesting moment because it was the last screw of the shed that I had to put on. And but I was sitting there yesterday, and I was just so thankful to have people around us. And you know what? We wouldn't be here without our community. So one, we're called to put our dependence on God. And the second thing that Jesus calls us to, and what we see as a theme throughout the New Testament, is dependence on other people. And I know it strikes to the core of what some of us have been fighting for, to be solely dependent and autonomous. And there's nothing wrong with self-expression or being unique. I'm not trying to pull any of that away. But what I am saying is you need somebody. And we need each other. And this is where the church is at its best. So for singles, I have a little bit of advice that I would like to give in the financial realm if I can. The first is this, and this again was something that our staff wanted to communicate out to you, and it's this, is to seek someone who is wise financially. I'm just going to say it like I see it. We often wait for somebody to come to us, and when they don't come to us, we blame people for not moving in our direction. If we are wanting to truly get some help, let's move in the direction of somebody else. I learned this lesson as a church planter, that nobody was going to come, and I'm just going to use this as an example. When we were raising money to launch Center Church, nobody was moving in my direction. I had to move in other people's direction. And it was a life lesson that I had to learn, that if I wanted to pursue what God had put on my heart, and if we want to pursue wisdom financially, we have to move in somebody's direction. Every week, there's people in the foyer. Every single week, there's people in the foyer that you can connect with, and I guarantee are wise financial people. Now, I'm not speaking to our whole church and where our whole church is at, but I know that there's people in here. And so I want to encourage you to move in somebody's direction. The second thing is this. Be the person you're looking for is looking for. We've talked about this in a relationship series, but here's what I want to say financially, is I've had to officiate a number of different weddings where debt got brought up or didn't want to be brought up, and it becomes a thing. So if relationships are on the horizon, start managing your money wisely now. Because if you don't, you're going to have to explain yourself down the road. And here's the thing. Marriage doesn't magically change stuff. I know this is a shocker. But just because you have two incomes down the road doesn't mean it changes your financial habits. Because if you still have bad financial habits, you're just going to keep spending to the level at which you earn. And so if you want to be the person you're looking for is looking for, lean into that and start practicing good financial habits today. Now, for those of you who are married, I'm going to get some pushback on this, but whatever. You only live once. YOLO, here we go. Join your bank accounts. So, I follow Dave Ramsey closely, and I have felt strongly about this for years. This is the number one thing he gets pushback on all the time. Through all my years of conversations around marriage and finances, for those, it's always been a point of tension. But for those that have separate bank accounts, it creates distrust. And what it says is, this is mine and that's yours. And this is important because one of the biggest reasons married couples fail to win with money is separate bank accounts. Because people think it gives them a sense of security and control. But those are the very things that aren't always allowing you to be vulnerable and to work through things. The goal of marriage is to work towards and pursue unity, and is a tactical sign of joining bank accounts, is a tactical sign of saying we are one. I know this isn't popular, but I'm going to say when you have separate, it creates distrust, and it also doesn't move in each other's direction. And the second one is this, and this is a tough one. Everyone loves this word, budget. Here's why we don't love this word, is because we believe it's about control rather than intentionality. So when you don't have a budget, you're being unintentional. You're saying, I think it's going to work out. I feel like we make a lot of money. But budgeting is just telling your money where you want it to go. So I want to encourage you, if you're married today, to sit down and have a budget conversation. Here's what I would say is, don't do it on Wednesday evening after driving the kids around if you have kids for 4 hours, or after you already had a conversation about what you want your values to be and you didn't quite get on the same page, or if you're both exhausted after a day of work. That is not the time to have the financial conversation. But if you do need to have it, pick a time, get it on the calendar, and communicate it as best you possibly can. And last is this: grow in self-awareness and have empathy. Because here's what, we believe that other people are like us and they just simply are not. Destiny is nothing like me in the sense of how we view how our money, the end goals of how our money should be spent. And here's what I mean by that. I would pay down every last cent as debt as fast as we could at the expense of our kids having any sort of joy. And my kids are sitting in the room going, thank God for mom, right? But if I don't have self-awareness, if I don't understand that that is making my kids grow resentful towards some of the decisions I've made because I'm always trying to pursue my own goals. And they're like, can I just play in a soccer tournament? Or can I have a hockey stick? Right? Like, no, and it's not that bad, but like... But grow in self-awareness. What do you bend towards? Are you a free spirit that spends money? Or are you the nerd like me? Where you are like, no, 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 no. And the other person's like, yes, 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 yes. That's a tap, right? Just tapping everything, right? But grow in self-awareness and empathy. Try to understand the person on the other side. Why do they have certain spending habits? Maybe they grew up in a house that didn't talk about money. Maybe they grew up in a house that had a bunch of free spenders. Maybe they lived in a house where the conversation around money was always about lack. And so when we grow in empathy and self-awareness, it helps us. And so whether you're single or you're married, this is where I want to end the series. And I think this is vital. And we talked about it with Paul today. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. And this is the last thing I want to say to both groups, is to honor God. And what does this look like for you? I mean, how do we honor God with our resources? I believe that every person should have a plan to support their local church. Yes, I believe this to be true. And to pick a percentage to give to a local church. Yes, I believe that to be true. I believe that to be godly. But honoring God can even go beyond that. Do we open up our home? Or do we think about somebody on the other side? Do we give resource away? Do we remind ourselves that life is not about all the things we can get, but also about what we can give? How can we honor God? If you're single, how are you honoring God financially? How can we put more of our dependence upon him? And if you're married, how can you honor God together? I'll say one of the hardest things to do is to pray together if you're married around your finances. And I'm going to be honest and transparent. This week, there was a decision made in my house that I didn't agree with. And you know what? It was mostly because I was holding on to something I didn't want to let go of. I was frustrated. You've never been there, right? I was upset. Probably could have been more calculated because I like being calculated. But I wasn't. And so I went on a motorcycle ride where all great things happen. And as I'm riding, I'm praying. And the feeling didn't change right away. But at least I brought it to God and I said, God, help me with this. Help me understand. Help me help myself. Have you ever prayed that one? And so, you know what? I was able to understand and grow in empathy and to understand that some things I've been holding on to that I need to let go. And we often believe that prayer is going to change the other person. I know you do this. It's like, God, would you change my spouse completely? Right? You've never prayed that prayer, but you've thought it, right? Whereas really prayer changes us. So right now, I want to take a moment because we all have our financial stuff going on. For some of you, it's a huge burden. And I want to encourage you to share that together, both with God and with people around you. If you're single, find somebody wise financially. If you need help with that, reach out to us and we'll get you connected. But if you're married, I know that this can carry a weight to it. I know from personal experience, it's not easy. And there can be disappointment, there can be conflict, there can be competing values, there can be competing opportunity. Now, I just want to pray that ultimately our dependence would be on God and not our will. Right? That's not the prayer. God, my will be done and you execute it. No. It's God, your will be done in me. God, if we're in need, would you provide? If we have much, help us to be generous. If we're at odds, help us come together. But I want to pray for you today. I want to pray that finances wouldn't weigh you down, but that you would find peace and contentment like Paul talked about, and that you would be able, in all things, that you would be able to have peace. For Paul said, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. So let's pray as we conclude the series that Jesus would strengthen us wherever we are. God, I thank you today. I thank you that we don't have to do life alone, that you're with us. But God, also that you surround us with people in our community. And God, sometimes we don't have it all together. If we're honest, most times we don't. But we know that, God, you hold the stars in place, that you created the universe, that, God, you care about every single part of our life, and yet you hold all things together. God, remind us of your sufficiency to take care of us. Remind us of the need that others have, that you would open our hands to be generous. That whether in lack or in plenty, whether in seasons of suffering or in joy, remind us that we can do all things because of you. God, I pray for contentment in our church, that we would find peace, we would find hope, and we'd find joy in you. Jesus, there's nothing better than you. You are the treasure of treasures. There's nothing greater we can find. And so I thank you that we have found you, that we can know you. And I thank you that we can find contentment in you. Where there's conflict in marriage this morning, God, I pray for your peace. I pray for your wisdom. For those that are fearful of these conversations or fearful of the future, I pray for your peace. God, help us in times where we don't even know what to say. Give us wisdom. Where there's discouragement, God, would you encourage us? Holy Spirit, today in our lives, have your way. Amen. I hope you have a great week. And I'm so looking forward to starting this series next week. I'm very excited, very excited. But today, whatever it looks like in terms of next steps, if you need something from us, again, if you're new here, why don't you text us hello. But if you do have any questions around finances, you can reach out to us at hello@thisiscenterpoint.org, and we'd love to help you take your next step. Have an amazing week. God bless you. And if you got kids, thank your kids leaders because they are also amazing. All right, have a great week. God bless you.